So after watching endless videos and debates on this gun control issue in America, I finally decided to share my unsolicited opinion too, because everybody else already did, and who am I to break off a trend?
You know, if everyone jumped off a cliff, would you?
The way I see it, on one hand you have the people who are pro-gun control, who think there should be more restrictions on who can own a gun and what type of guns can civilian have, and some of them actually argue downright for banning guns, well, certain type of guns, especially rifles, shotguns, semi-automatics, that type of stuff. Basically they're saying, hey, look what's happening, you have mass shootings and related high crime rates and people die and shit, and that's no fun. And while I sympathize with that in theory, I think there are so many guns in circulation already in the US and people love their guns so much that trying to ban them would kinda be like trying to ban rice in China. Yeah, good luck with that. Hooray for the black market!
So here you acknowledge that prohibition, in this case of firearms, doesn't work. And I'm pretty sure you would advocate that, say, prohibition on prostitution, pornography, marijuana, other drugs perhaps, does not work. And you would be correct. Yet it seems in the latter part of your video, when you say that no one needs a semi-automatic gun, that you want to advocate for banning of a semi-automatic firearm. This leads me to ask you, what would make a ban on semi-automatic firearms work, but not one on regular guns? Now, maybe I'm just reading too much into what you say there, but it appears that you think that they should be banned because there's no real point to them. And I'll cover that point a little bit later.
And on the other hand, you have the people who wave around the Second Amendment as if the Constitution is something unchangeable, untouchable, above any reproach.
Now, I cannot deny that there are those segments of the population in the United States that believe that. But I will say that that probably does not sum up most people's position that, well, the Constitution can't change, or that it's this perfect document. I know for a fact I don't believe that. I know for a fact many people don't believe that. Many people want to change it to ban gay marriage in that case. I am not one of those people, obviously, but there is that segment of the population out there. So most people do believe the Constitution can and even should be changed. Most people don't sit there and think it's perfect, never should be touched or changed again.
Never to be challenged, never to be questioned. Newsflash, the US Constitution is not a divine piece of writing dictated by God himself, any more than the Bible is. It was created by people, people are flawed, times change and so do laws. If you personally think that everybody should have the right to carry any type of firearm, you need to argue that with something else besides
it's written down right here.
Actually, they don't. You see, that written down right here notebook paper isn't just any piece of paper. It is the document that founded our government, gives structure to our government, tells what government can and cannot do, how it's supposed to run, etc. And in that, there is an amendment that says, in the interest of, to keep a well-regulated militia, which is necessary for a free state, the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. And when they point to that, they are correct in saying, you can't ban guns. That says so. In fact, that is what the Supreme Court has found in the case of Heller v. District of Columbia. I'll link to that ruling in the description box. And this doesn't necessarily mean there can't be restrictions put on this, obviously. Even Justice Anthony Scalia, who wrote the opinion on it, said there could be restrictions. But that is a valid argument. And when you sat there and said, well, it's not a document ordained by God any more than the Bible is, it starts to make you think that you're thinking this is like an argument on religion where someone is saying, well, the Bible is true because the Bible says so. This is not the case. This is the case of someone saying, the Bible says homosexuality is wrong and points to Leviticus 20:13, and they'd be correct in doing so. Except this document actually has any severe consequence, as this is in terms of government.
Trying to justify future laws with the laws by which you are currently governed is a circular argument.
That's kind of bad. I mean, I didn't know you were pro-life, seeing as it's not like when they made the Roe v. Wade ruling, they weighted against an old law like the U.S. Constitution, or weighted on an old ruling like Griswold v. Connecticut in terms of precedent, in order to make that ruling. And it's not like any future ruling on abortion will use Roe v. Wade as precedent.
Now you see, I'm from a country called Romania. That's in Europe, right next to Russia. You know Russia. They had Stalin, they like vodka, they can be seen by Sarah Palin from Alaska, and that's me right there next to it. So being from a place that's not the United States, I cannot easily shake the what the fuck element of this debate. You see, for me, as I'm sure for many other non-US people, it is very odd to see the right to carry firearms sitting pretty in the Constitution right next to the right to freedom of speech.
Just because that amendment is second on the Constitution doesn't mean it's the second most important amendment. Also, this often has to tie into our history, as, say, about 10 years before that, the Constitution was written. We were fighting a violent revolution with private citizens with guns against the British government. And this isn't something exclusive to the United States in terms of having lots of guns. A country like Switzerland has a lot of guns, and they don't have as high of gun crime. This is most likely due to other cultural factors, and I will get into that later.
I do believe that the real problem is the glorified gun culture in the United States.
While I could definitely agree that maybe some of this is in terms of, say, glorified gun ownership, etc. in the United States, I think more problems might have to do with the poverty in the United States, the income inequality, the lack of education on guns. I distinctly remember pretty much every year, don't do drugs, which, that worked out well. Don't drink, that worked out well. I remember for like 2 years you had don't have sex till you're married, and that also worked out well. And then for one school assembly in middle school, was gun safety, and thankfully I haven't shot anyone yet. But, so it's 1 out of 4. But there's very little education when it comes to guns. And when it comes to gun safety, I believe in Texas you need a 10-hour course to be able to conceal a gun. These are things that probably should be worked out. And this also might have to do with, say, a failing mental health system, poor screening, which even many NRA members are in favor of higher background checks. There may be other factors that tie into this besides just having lots of guns around. The whole idea of just banning guns, whether it be semi-automatics or guns outright, will solve the problem, is lazy and it's stupid, and it doesn't actually tackle the real root of the problem. If you get rid of guns, people are still going to commit crime, maybe because they're poor and they need to eat. Maybe they might just go and stab someone because they're mentally ill and don't have the ability to go out and seek proper mental health treatment. These are things that need to be worked out. And instead of just saying, well, let's just ban guns and leave it at that, so we feel good and sleep better at night, why don't we actually try and tackle the actual real problems at hand?
This widespread perception that somehow guns equal safety, and that owning a gun is your fundamental right.
Firstly, there's also a misconception that no guns equals safety. And you seem to be throwing that one out there. And there is no misconception that owning a gun is a fundamental right. It is a right in the United States to own a gun. Now, this might not be a right in Romania. I'm not that knowledgeable in Romanian politics, so I'm not going to throw that one out there. But in some countries, it may be a right that you can own a firearm.
One more thing, because there's one question that keeps on popping up from the people who are pro-gun control, and that's, what could civilians ever need semi-automatics for? And the main response from the anti-gun control side was that
what anti-gun control site were you looking at and referencing? You don't link it in the description box, and so there might be more people and more answers to this question than what you have just looked at. I don't know what research you did, if any, and if you're looking at, say, the NRA website, that doesn't necessarily speak for anyone who wants a semi-automatic, as the NRA has a nasty habit of not even speaking for their members. So just reading one website does not constitute, or any amount of website does not constitute all the arguments out there, and that you can just use this one argument to do it. This gives your audience a very false picture of those who have the opposing view to you. I'm not going to go out and say it was intentionally intellectually dishonest, but it is still a bit of a shitty move.
That civilians need protection from the government. If the government decides to go all Gestapo-ish, or if there's some civil war starting between civilians and the government, people need to be armed to defend themselves. And to me this scenario seems so naive.
Personally, I think these scenarios that people have come up with are a bit paranoid. especially when I hear one saying, well, what if we have a Hitler? Well, the Weimar Constitution is vastly different from our Constitution. And when it came to the Weimar Republic, well, Hitler used the emergency provisions to rule legitimately. So when people say this stuff, I usually think they're paranoid. However, it's really funny how you sit there and say, well, what if they go Gestapo-ish? That's crazy. 25 years ago, about, your country had a violent revolution to overthrow a very short, shitty communist dictator. So I think one could, if one was from your country, they could understand that sentiment. Now, personally, I don't see it as a likely scenario, but whatever. And you're sitting here for the rest of the video implying that people need a semi-automatic, and I don't think you fully understand what that term implies, but I'm not going to cover that because it's really not relevant to the conversation. Just because you don't need something doesn't mean it's okay to ban it or that, we should just get rid of it. People don't need fast cars. People don't need cigarettes. People don't need alcohol. Yet these are things that people would not advocate for banning. Maybe some environmentalists might advocate banning, say, a Ferrari or something because of the poor fuel mileage and emissions. But there are things out there that we don't need yet have no trouble not banning. This is just something that you personally dislike, you personally don't see a need for, and therefore you have a problem with it. Someone could say the same thing about, say, a cigarette or something that you might enjoy, that you don't need that, therefore it's okay to ban it. So, yeah, that's pretty much every single issue I have with your video. Have a nice day.